Greetings. We continue today on the message to the eternally secured ones from Jude verses 1 through 3. Now we will look at the divine guardianship of the soul, which is mercy, according to Jude verse 2. It uses the word kept or preserved. I wish it a mercy and a peace and a love might be multiplied to you all. We should note the word multiplied, which is Strong's 4129, is a aorist passive optative, which means to multiply or to increase. The optative simply is used to express a wish for something to be done to us. So the syntax, the optative is used very infrequently in the New Testament, so I have trouble pronouncing it. Davis called it a weaker form of the subjunctive mode, expressing what might be instead of what should be. The best determination of the expression of a wish as is used above. See, those in Jesus Christ have been guarded and are in a permanent state of being carefully watched. Again, that's according to Wuest. This watching is not the guarding of a prisoner by a jailer. Rather, it's the mother keeping her child under her watch. Preserved by means of Jesus Christ is instrumental. And when we get down there to Jude 24, it says, now unto him that is able to keep you from falling and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. A mother's watchful eye over her child is a constant and a persistent watchful care. Jeremiah was called the weeping prophet, and he wrote a book entitled Lamentations. But even in the midst of all the things that he was told that he had to foretell that were going to come as God's punishment on his people, very famously in chapter 2, verses 22 and 23, we find these words. It is of the Lord's mercies that we're not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Now, as we conclude this first section, I want to share a little, just brief history. There were 7 churches in Asia in the book of Revelation in chapter 2, which existed as contemporaries to one another. I believe through the study of God's Word that those 7 types of churches are still found in the world today. In fact, I think as you go through them, you might say they describe a life cycle for a church and maybe for individual members of the church. But very quickly, it's also regarded by many that they're representative of stages of church history. The first is Ephesus, which means boiling over with zeal for Christ, and it's supposed to describe the church from AD 30 to 251. Smyrna means bitter and suffering, and they were suffering with Christ from 251 to 316. Pergamos means concerning marriage, which is compromise, from 316 to 606. Thyatira means to weary with sacrifice, and it becomes what we call apathy, from 606 to 1517. And then there's Sardis, the fleshly church, serving self, from 1517 to 1650. And then there was Philadelphia, the brotherly love that digressed from the agape that we've talked about from 1650 to 1900. And then there's Laodicea, the people's self-righteous church, where they were self-sufficient. And that's regarded from 1900 until the second coming. Of note, Pergamos, the marriage of the church and state, happened during that time with Constantine's universal church. The fleshly church, Sardis, coincides with the Protestant Reformation. And Philadelphia coincides with the Great Awakening, even in our country. But our government, educational systems have now apostatized. That's what the book of Jude is all about. That's why we're writing. We must contend for the faith because there are those who have stood off from it and turned away from it. They've backslidden from our God-fearing and God-honoring beginnings. Someone has noted that persecution comes from the outside in, but apostasy and backsliding come from within. Psalm 11 verse 3 says, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? I heard the story of an inmate in a mental institution who was found digging an escape route through the foundation of the building. When asked if he understood the consequences of such an action, he replied, it's all right, my room is on the second floor. And I think how many well-meaning scholars undermine the foundational principle of God's Word, protesting it's all right because their theology is housed on the second floor, so to speak.